Camilla walks into the quiet palace room, calm on the outside, but burning with power inside. Princess Anne sits across from her, sharp gaze ready, but the air feels heavy. Voices are low, yet the tension feels loud. Then Camilla's words drop like thunder. This is how things will be from now on. For a moment, silence freezes the room. Anne's pride meets Camilla's rising authority, and the quiet battle becomes impossible to hide. Behind closed doors, something breaks, something shifts, and the palace will never forget this meeting. What really happened in that room next will shock everyone. The summons in the palace. It was a gray December morning when Princess Anne's phone rang with a number she recognized immediately. Buckingham Palace. Not the public line, not the press office, but the private extension that connects directly to the Queen's office. The Princess Royal, known for her unshakable composure, felt something shift in her chest as she answered. The voice on the other end was clipped, formal, and left no room for negotiation. Queen Camilla requested her presence at the palace. Today, 2 o'clock, private meeting, no staff. And stood in the drawing room of Gatcombe Park, her Gloucestershire estate, staring out at the rolling hills she'd called home for decades. She'd been expecting this, perhaps not today, perhaps not this week, but she'd known it was coming. The tension between herself and Camilla had been building for months, simmering beneath the surface of state dinners and family gatherings, hidden behind tight smiles and carefully worded public statements. But something had changed in recent weeks. Something had pushed Camilla past the point of royal restraint. The Princess Royal made 2 phone calls before leaving for London. The first was to her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, informing him simply that she'd been summoned to the palace and might be late for dinner. The second call was to someone she trusted implicitly, someone who would know if she didn't return by a certain time. Anne wasn't dramatic by nature, but she was strategic, and she knew Camilla well enough to understand that this meeting could change everything. As her car pulled away from Gatcombe Park, staff members watched from windows with expressions of concern. The household had been with Anne for years, some for decades, and they could read her moods like weather patterns. Today there was something different in the set of her shoulders, the line of her jaw. Their princess was preparing for battle. The drive to London took just over 2 hours, and spent the time in silence, reviewing in her mind the likely reasons for this summons. Was it about the recent interview where she'd subtly questioned the modernization efforts Camilla was championing? Was it about the Christmas arrangements and Anne's refusal to alter traditions to accommodate Camilla's family? Or was it something deeper, something that went back decades to the days when Diana was alive and Anne had made her loyalties painfully clear? By the time her vehicle pulled through the gates of Buckingham Palace, it was 1:45 in the afternoon, 15 minutes early. Anne's habit, born from a lifetime of military precision and royal duty. But as she stepped out of the car, she noticed something unusual. The palace seemed quieter than normal. Fewer staff members visible in the corridors, an emptiness that felt deliberate. A lone private secretary met her at the entrance. A young woman and didn't recognize. No warm greeting, no small talk about the weather or the traffic, just a polite nod and a gesture toward the stairs. Her Majesty is waiting in the white drawing room, Your Royal Highness. The formal title hung in the air like a challenge. Not Anne, not even Princess Anne, but the full royal designation. This was official. This was serious. They passed the throne room and caught a glimpse through the open doors of 2 staff members speaking in hushed tones. The moment they saw her, they fell silent and scattered. She knew then with absolute certainty that palace staff had been talking about this meeting, speculating, taking sides. The private secretary knocked once, opened the door, and announced simply Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. Then she stepped aside and walked into the room alone. Queen Camilla stood by the window backlit by the pale December sun, her silhouette framed against the London skyline. She didn't turn immediately. A power play Anne recognized and chose not to acknowledge. Instead, the Princess Royal walked calmly to the center of the room and waited. When Camilla finally turned, her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed something else. Anger, resentment, and beneath it all, something that looked almost like fear. The 2 women regarded each other across the expanse of priceless carpet and antique furniture. 73-year-old Anne and 77-year-old Camilla, both dressed impeccably, both aware that what happened in the next hour could not be undone. "Thank you for coming," Camilla said, her voice steady but cold. It wasn't gratitude. It was a formality, a thin veneer of politeness stretched over barely controlled fury. "You summoned me," Anne replied evenly. "As queen, that's your prerogative." The emphasis on queen was so slight that anyone listening might have missed it. But Camilla heard it. She heard the quotation marks and had placed around the title. The subtle suggestion that the legitimacy of Camilla's position was still even now a matter of debate in Anne's mind. And just like that, the pretense of civility shattered. 2 queens, 1 throne. To understand the collision that was about to occur in the white drawing room, you have to go back decades back to 1981 when a shy 19-year-old named Diana Spencer walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral to marry Prince Charles. While somewhere in the congregation sat his former lover, Camilla Parker B.S. Even then, Princess Anne had her suspicions. Princess Anne, who'd experienced her own marriage difficulties and subsequent divorce, had a certain sympathy for Diana's position. But more than that, she had a rigid sense of duty and propriety. Charles was heir to the throne. He'd made vows. He had responsibilities. And Camilla, in Anne's view, was the catalyst for a catastrophe that was damaging the monarchy's reputation with every tabloid headline. The Princess Royal never made her feelings publicly known. That wasn't her style. But those close to the family understood that Anne had taken Diana's side, quietly but firmly. At family gatherings in the 1990s, Anne's interactions with Camilla were minimal. Cordial on the surface but glacial underneath. When Diana passed away in 1997, that coolness turned to ice. Anne attended Diana's funeral with tears streaming down her face. Genuine grief for a woman who'd been destroyed by the very institution and had dedicated her life to serving. And she'd watched Camilla's absence from the funeral, noted Charles's devastation, and hardened her heart against the woman she held partially responsible for the tragedy. The years that followed saw a gradual public rehabilitation of Camilla's image. Charles was determined to marry her, to make her his wife and eventually his queen. The palace machinery went to work, slowly shifting public perception, preparing the ground for Camilla's acceptance. But Princess Anne remained unmoved. She attended Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005 with a face like stone, fulfilling her duty, but making it clear through every gesture that this was not a celebration in her eyes. Through the years of Charles's second marriage, Anne maintained a careful distance from Camilla. They worked together when necessary, appeared together at state functions, exchanged pleasantries that meant nothing, but there was never warmth, never genuine friendship. Camilla knew it. Everyone knew it. Princess Anne, who could charm foreign dignitaries and put nervous members of the public at ease, who laughed freely with friends and showed genuine affection to those she trusted, turned to marble in Camilla's presence. The tension escalated when Queen Elizabeth passed away in September of 2022. Suddenly, Charles was king and Camilla, after years of being gradually accepted as Duchess of Cornwall, was queen consort. The title would eventually be shortened to simply Queen. Elizabeth herself had expressed her wish for this in her Platinum Jubilee message, and Camilla would stand beside Charles as his crowned and anointed queen. Princess Anne had watched this transformation with barely concealed disgust. In her view, Camilla was a woman who'd broken up a marriage, contributed to Diana's misery, and was now being rewarded with the second highest position in the land. The fact that Charles loved her, that they'd been together for decades, that public opinion had softened considerably, none of it mattered to Anne. Duty, honor, and the sanctity of marriage vows mattered, and Camilla had violated all three, but Anne kept silent. She performed her royal duties, second only to the king in the number of engagements she undertook annually. She supported her brother publicly, appeared at his side at the coronation in May of 2023, and maintained the facade of family unity. Privately, however, she made her feelings known in subtle ways. She refused invitations to intimate dinners at Clarence's house. She declined to join holidays where Camilla's children and grandchildren would be present. She maintained a relationship with William and Catherine, with Edward and Sophie, but kept Camilla at arm's length. And Camilla, for her part, had tolerated this. She'd built a thick skin over the years, endured far worse than Anne's cold shoulder. She had Charles's love, the public's grudging acceptance, and now the crown. What did it matter if one princess, however hard-working and respected, refused to embrace her? But something had shifted in recent months. Since becoming queen, Camilla had grown more confident, more assertive. She'd begun making changes to royal protocol, modernizing certain traditions, bringing her own family more prominently into royal life, and she'd started to chafe at Anne's subtle insubordination, the way the Princess Royal could communicate disapproval without saying a word, the way staff members still deferred to Anne's judgment over Camilla's preferences. The breaking point had come 2 weeks earlier at a family dinner at Windsor Castle. It was meant to be a quiet evening. Just the core working royals discussing plans for the upcoming Christmas season. Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, and Edward, and Sophie gathered around a table in the private dining room. The kind of meeting that happened regularly where family and business blurred together. The discussion had turned to Christmas at Sandringham, the traditional royal gathering that had been reinstated after Elizabeth's death. Camilla had proposed inviting her children and grandchildren to join for Boxing Day, a departure from tradition, but one she felt was overdue. She'd married into this family 20 years ago, and her own children had never been fully integrated into the royal celebrations. The table had gone quiet. William and Catherine exchanged glances. Edward studied his wine glass. Anne had set down her fork with deliberate precision and said in a voice like cut glass, "I think we need to be very careful about diluting what makes the royal family royal." The words hung in the air. Charles had tried to smooth things over, suggesting they discuss it further before making any decisions. But Camilla's face had flushed red, her jaw clenched, and for the first time in decades she'd looked at Anne with open hostility. "My family has as much right to be there as anyone else," Camilla had said, her voice shaking slightly. "I am queen. My husband is king, and I will not be treated as a second-class member of this family any longer." And had smiled then. A cold, devastating smile that everyone at the table recognized. "Being queen is about more than a title, Camilla. It's about earning the respect that comes with it. And some of us remember when your priorities were quite different." The dinner had ended shortly after. Charles had been furious with Anne. Had called her later that night demanding an apology, but Anne had refused. She'd said nothing untrue, nothing that everyone at that table hadn't been thinking. Camilla wanted to be queen.